You know what nobody wants to say? 5 words. 5 words that may be the most politically self-destructive sentence uttered in the Oval Office this decade.
Wow.
I love the inflation. That's the President of the United States on the record as CPI just hit 4.2%, a 3-year high.
Said it with a smile, too.
Like a man who just found a 20 in an old jacket. Meanwhile, grocery bills are climbing, wages aren't keeping up, and CNBC is running the quote on a chyron. This is the show today.
And look, there's actually a case buried in there. Energy is driving the bulk of that headline number. The Iran war is a real variable, and core inflation is sitting at 2.9. The White House has a defense. Whether it holds up is a separate question.
That's the question. Does he have a defensible economic argument, or did he just hand every critic a quote that will outlive this news cycle? We're going to work through both sides of that.
We'll break down the May CPI print, what's actually in it, and what the tariff-to-price pipeline looks like now that retailers have stopped absorbing the hit.
And then there's Marjorie Taylor Greene calling the line a punch in the gut on CNN and gifting Democrats a ready-made campaign ad heading into the midterms, which is a sentence I did not expect to write this week.
Wild week.
Wild week. We'll also get into what this means for swing district Republicans 6 months from November. Trap or opening?
And we close on what a principled conservative accountability case actually looks like. Not the talking points, the real argument.
4.2%. I love the inflation. Let's find out if those two things can coexist. The show starts right now. Before we dig in, a quick reminder. We love hearing from you. If you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, head to the link in the description and submit your question. We read every single one. I love the inflation. That's the quote. Oval Office, reporters standing right there. BLS just dropped a CPI reading of 4.2% year over year, the first time it cracked 4% since 2023. And that is what the President of the United States said.
I mean, you almost have to respect the audacity.
He didn't stumble into it either. He went further. Time reported he said inflation is going to come down like a rock once the Iran war ends. So that's the argument. This is war inflation, temporary, not his fault.
And look, that argument has a real economic basis. Energy accounts for more than 60% of the CPI increase, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you end the conflict, energy prices ease, the headline number drops. That logic is not crazy.
The logic isn't crazy, the sentence is crazy.
Yeah, the sentence is a problem.
You know what nobody wants to say? A president can have a defensible economic read and still hand every political opponent a loaded weapon, and then act surprised when they pull the trigger.
The Hill reported that even Marjorie Taylor Greene said this quote is going to bite him. That's not a Democrat talking. That's his own base flagging the optics.
When Marjorie Greene is the voice of restraint, hold on, let that land. You stepped in something.
The White House is now running 2 stories simultaneously. Prices are up sharply, but trust us, they'd be worse without us. That's a very hard sell at a grocery store.
CNBC put it straight. Elevated prices have cost the average household more than $3,100. That's not a data point. That's a kitchen table number. People feel that.
And the question that actually matters, the one the White House framing does not answer, is how much of that pain is war and how much was already baked in before a single missile flew.
Yeah, and that's exactly where the CPI report gets interesting. So let's actually look at what 4.2% means when you break it down. The BLS data shows energy accounted for over 60% of the entire monthly increase. Strip that out, core inflation, food and energy excluded, sits at 2.9% annually, which is the number the White House is going to quote every single time.
Exactly. And on a spreadsheet, that argument has some merit. But here's my problem with it. The person filling up a tank and buying ground beef doesn't live on a spreadsheet. Right. Nobody sits at the dinner table going, well, core is 2.9, so I'm fine. No, and the grocery aisle is where this gets specific. AEI's analysis shows ground beef prices were up roughly 17.9% and coffee up roughly 31.9% between January and late 2025. Those aren't one-time shocks. Tariffs are a contributing factor AEI names directly. Wait, coffee up 31%? Nearly 32%. Brazil faces a 50% tariff on its exports to the U.S., and we get roughly a third of our coffee beans from Brazil. There's nowhere else to source it at that scale. So you've got energy driving the headline number and groceries quietly doing their own damage underneath it, and the White House gets to point at the headline and say, see, energy, Iran, war. Right, and that argument is not wrong, but it conveniently ignores what was already baked in before the first missile flew. The Tax Foundation estimates current tariff policy, what's left after the Supreme Court struck down IEEPA levies in February, still amounts to roughly $700 per household this year. $700 on top of energy. On top of energy. So the question isn't whether the Iran war pushed prices up. It did. The question is what floor prices were already sitting on before it did. And that floor was built in Washington, which is exactly where the next conversation goes, because the pipeline from tariff policy to your shopping cart is more direct than most people realize.
So, while Washington points at Tehran for every price spike, retailers have been running their own quiet little experiment. Let me call it what it is, the delayed pain tour.
That is unfortunately accurate.
The whole 2025 story was absorption. Retailers swallowed the tariff costs, kept prices steady, protected their margins just long enough. Now that inventory's gone.
And the Federal Reserve actually documented this. Fed researchers published a note in April. They found tariffs implemented through November 2025 raised core goods PCE prices by 3.1% through February 2026. And they're direct about it.
Wow.
That figure, quote, explains the entirety of excess inflation in the core goods category relative to pre-pandemic rates.
Wait, entirety? Not contributed to, not was a factor in.
Entirety, dollar for dollar.
So the receipt was always coming, it just took a year to arrive.
Morningstar's got a similar read. Durable goods, electronics, appliances, tools, they're projecting a cumulative 4.5% increase over the 2025 to 2027 window. We're in the middle of that window right now.
And this is the distinction the White House does not want voters drawing. Iran is real. Energy costs from that conflict are real, but energy and goods inflation are two different animals running in the same direction.
Right, and when you blend them together into one headline number, you can blame one and ignore the other. That's the whole strategy.
You know what that press release would look like? This appliance price increase was brought to you by the Iran war. Some restrictions apply. Tariff contribution not included. See shelves for details.
Rush.
I'm serious. That's the gift receipt version of inflation policy.
The problem is some people inside the coalition are starting to notice the receipt, and one of them just went on CNN to say so.
Someone inside the coalition just noticed the receipt and went on CNN to say so.
And not just anyone, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene on CNN with Caitlin Collins agreeing with the Democratic attack line. I want everyone to sit with that for a second.
The Hill covered it. Her exact words, he basically just handed the Democrats a great big campaign ad for the 2026 midterms.
Campaign ad handed to them, free of charge, no production budget required.
She also called it, and I'm reading this directly, a punch in the gut to every single American struggling to pay their bills.
She called it a punch in the gut, which means the most loyal corners of the MAGA coalition are now using the exact same language as the DNC talking points memo.
And that's the real story, not the optics of which channel she chose. Republican operatives have been saying this privately for months. Greene just said it out loud, on camera, to a national audience.
Wait, she also reminded everyone that MAGA spent 4 years screaming about Biden inflation, their words, at the top of their lungs.
Right. So the argument that this president gets a pass because it's his inflation, that doesn't survive contact with the base's own history.
You know what nobody wants to say? When MTG is your early warning system, you don't have a messaging problem, you have a substance problem.
That's the signal worth watching. This isn't Greene going rogue for attention. It's a data point about where base tolerance for economic pain actually sits. And that tolerance appears to have a ceiling.
Which brings us to November, because every swing district Republican now has to answer one question.
Do you love it too?
Good luck with that one.
So the question every swing district Republican is waking up with right now, what do you run on in November? Because that Oval Office moment follows you onto every debate stage.
And the numbers make it worse. Brookings had Trump's approval on handling inflation at just 30% as of late April. First time since 2010 that Democrats poll higher on the economy than Republicans.
30%. You know what I call that? The survival crouch. That's the posture every Republican in a swing district is doing right now. Head down, arms up, hoping the quote doesn't land on them.
I get the visual, but I actually think there's an opening there for a candidate who gets out in front of it, proactively. You don't have to love the inflation. You can say you don't.
You think a Republican in a Biden to Trump district can criticize the White House on kitchen table economics and survive the primary?
I think a Republican who doesn't is handing over the general. Look at what Brian Fitzpatrick said. CNBC quoted him directly. When half of America is living paycheck to paycheck, the word ballroom should not be in anyone's vocabulary.
He said that out loud.
He did, and Fitzpatrick represents a swing district in Pennsylvania. He's not committing political suicide, he's trying to survive.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
But here's my problem. Fitzpatrick can pull that off because he has a brand. The freshman in a marginal district? No brand, no runway. I love the inflation is now the default Republican position in every Democrat ad from now until November.
Which is exactly why the ones who establish distance early have a shot. Not separation from the party, separation from the moment.
That's a real distinction, I'll give you that.
The voters who need convincing aren't asking for a party switch. They're asking for one Republican to look them in the eye on grocery prices.
And the White House's answer to all of this? Still pointing at Biden. Which, we need to get into that because that clock has an expiration date on it, and I think the May CPI data just punched it.
The White House's current answer to everything, and I mean everything, is some version of prices would be worse under a Democrat. That's the whole defense. That's the clock they're running.
Right, and the numbers in some categories actually support that framing. Biden averaged 5% inflation annually. The comparison isn't invented.
Right, but you can't win a grocery run with a history lesson. Nobody at the checkout counter cares what Joe Biden would have done.
Which is exactly what happened to Biden and Harris. They ran the transitory argument until it stopped working. Now the same logic is running in reverse.
CNBC's Q1 2026 All-America Economic Survey had Trump's net approval on the economy at -21,
Wow.
his lowest ever across both terms. That clock I mentioned?
It's not ticking anymore.
Expired. Right there in the poll.
The comparison to Biden isn't wrong on the merits, but leading with a dead man's economic record when CPI just crossed 4.2% is a losing argument.
You know what nobody wants to say? The White House isn't even making an affirmative case. They're just pointing backwards and hoping voters don't look forward.
And voters are looking forward. They're doing it at the grocery store, at the pump. CNBC reported elevated prices have cost the average household more than $3,100 by one estimate. That's not Biden-era money.
Right.
That's now.
The blame Biden clock had a stamp on it the day I took office. The May CPI print just punched it.
So, if that argument is done, and I think it is, the question becomes, what does a credible conservative case actually look like from here?
That's exactly where we're going.
So where does that leave us? The better than Biden clock has expired. The question now is what conservatives actually do with that.
The policy picture is not fixed. The Section 122 tariffs expire July 24th. The USTR has 2 Section 301 investigations running, and those could replace them with something permanent. No time cap, no rate ceiling. That's a real fork in the road.
And that fork is exactly where the right needs to show up with a real argument, not a press release.
The credible conservative case isn't complicated. Separate the tariff-driven goods inflation from the war-driven energy spike. They're different problems with different levers. Then demand a real timeline from the White House. Not when the war ends, an actual timeline. Because when the war ends is not a fiscal policy.
When the war ends is what you say when you don't have a policy.
And stop treating CPI like a political football. This administration spent years calling out Democrats for doing exactly that. The argument that the number matters when it's going down and doesn't matter when it's going up, that's not a governing philosophy. That's a scoring system.
Right. And voters who put this administration in office on a lower prices mandate deserve better than a shrug and a smile from the Oval Office.
The opening is there for any conservative willing to take it. Name the 2 inflations, demand the timeline, hold the line on what the number actually means. That's accountability.
That's also why this show exists, Reagan.
It is.
And a president walks into the Oval Office, CPI hits a 3-year high at 4.2%, and he says, "I love the inflation." Somebody has to say that's not a win. That's a confession.
Yeah. It is.
We'll be right back.
All right, that's a wrap on today's show. And what a show! 4 words to find this whole thing. I love the inflation.
4 words. Oval Office, CPI at 4.2%. The gift that keeps giving.
To Democrats, apparently. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene's point, and she's not wrong.
Look, we separated the 2 inflations today. Energy-driven war inflation is real and potentially temporary. Tariff-driven grocery pain, that was baked in before the first missile flew.
And the White House's better than Biden defense? We walked through exactly why that clock ran out.
The principled case isn't complicated. Demand a real policy timeline. Stop treating CPI as a political prop.
Accountability isn't disloyalty. Say it loud enough and maybe someone in a swing district hears it.
That's the show.
Subscribe, leave us 5 stars, tell a friend who needs to hear this. New episodes every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks for writing this one out with us. See you then.